Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Bircher, Director of Technical Services here at CTC, and today we are going to discuss a workflow for the MEP Productivity Pack and how to incorporate manufacturer families into the pack, as well as the process for upgrading the content from your 2019.1.1 pack. Before we begin, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions using the questions panel throughout the webinar. I will do my best to answer them as we go, and any remaining questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. This is also going to be recorded and be made available on our YouTube channel so that you can review at your convenience. So with that said, let's get started.
Now, one of the biggest challenges that we face as Revit users and BIM admins is incorporating content that was downloaded from another source, whether it's BIM object or Revit City type website, some other or a manufacturer's website, and getting that to work with our projects is a lot of manual efforts, let alone, and then now that we've got the MEP Productivity Pack, which is a great starting point for any firm working in Revit, specifically for MEP, we now have a new version out with a previous version of content that that you guys have been using potentially for the last few years. And now we need to try to find a way to incorporate that into the new version. And if you're familiar with the new version, there's been a lot of changes. You don't have to start over and rebuild in all of the edits and customizations that you've made to the existing content. We can take that content and bring it forward and use it in the new pack with some of the workflows that are going to be outlined today. So what we're going to do is give you an overview of how this process works. Now, this process is outlined in the user guide for the MEP Productivity Pack, starting on page 80, I believe. Yes, page 80. And it tells you what you need to do and where the settings are, what settings need to be used for what purpose. I'm going to dial it in a little bit further and kind of walk you through it a bit. So we're going to touch on, just going to do a quick review of Family Processor and the MEP pack, just to kind of give you guys some background. I'm going to show you how to edit the settings and how those are going to work. And then we're going to go over two workflows: how to upgrade your MEP content from 2019, and then how to migrate or incorporate manufacturer content downloaded from whomever's website. So that's kind of the outline for today. So quick overview: when you purchase the MEP Productivity Pack, you get a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll show you this here in a second, but you get a bunch of folders. In one of those folders, there's a bunch of Family Processor settings files. Now, on the surface, there's nothing there to tell you exactly how it works. You have to read the user guide to find out what those are for. Or you've talked to us already and we've explained it. So I'm going to show you what those are for and kind of what the intent is here for those and how those Family Processor settings are intended to work. And then we have to make a few edits to those to make sure that they will work in your environment and on your systems. Then we're going to take those settings files and we're going to start upgrading some content. And first thing we're going to do is update one of the families from the 2019.1.1 pack and show you the steps to take to get those families updated to be used in the new starter projects and sample projects that you've got for 20.1.2. Then we're going to go, I've downloaded a handful of families. I'm going to grab one of them and we're going to walk through that process and show you how to take the existing manufacturer content as is and get it prepped and ready to go so that you can use it in the pack. So step one, getting set up. So with Family Processor, there's a couple of things that I like to do to get ready for this type of work, because this is potentially a large undertaking. Now, if you're just doing it for one family, not that big a deal. But if you're doing it for a bunch of stuff and you're going to upgrade all of the content that you modified from 2019 to be used with 2020, it helps to have some setup and to get all your ducks in a row prior to going through this exercise. And then we have to get our settings files in place. So we're going to start there. I'm going to switch over, and this is just in Explorer, nothing fancy. So step one is to show you what you get. So when you download the MEP Productivity Pack, you're going to get all of these different folders. You get some basic information, an add-ins folder, your linked models, your parameters file, the user guide, additional documentation, which helps for starter project setup and things like that, and then all your content. We're going to focus on the common add-ins folder for today, specifically the family processor folder. Now in here, this is the list of all of the settings that you are given. And that's a long list of settings. So there's a lot going on here. Now, the user guide tells you exactly which files are used for which step in the process. So I've taken these and separated it out to organize it a little bit better for me, to help me understand what files are for what, and how it just kind of organizes my thoughts a little bit better. So in my settings folder here, I have my content processing folder and my settings files, and I've broken it up into 4 sections here. Section A, or 1, is the upgrade settings file. It's one file that if you are going to upgrade your MEP content from a previous version, you're going to run this on all of those families. So it's one settings file that adds and replaces and removes a bunch of parameters. And really what it is that the reason why we have to do this specifically is with the 20.1.2 pack, or the 2020 version of the pack, we made a change to a lot of different parameters, and we standardized some things, and we simplified the process a little bit, and made more of the parameters usable by different categories within the pack. So we don't specifically have 500 mechanical specific parameters and 300 electric specific parameters. We weeded those down, and anything that could be used by both categories are now used by both. So nothing is specific to a specific discipline as much as it was previously. So we've consolidated, we've standardized. We also are standardizing against ASHRAE, and we have with NEMA, and there's a couple other ones that the name eludes me right now. So, but we've done a lot of that extra work and cleanup. So you have to go through this process to get all of the newest parameters into your content. That's step 1. And then we have schedules. So there's a settings file for each schedule contained in the sample project with the MEP pack. This is going to make sure that the content we are upgrading will work in the schedule. It has all the parameters it needs and all the formulas that go along with it, just for basic scheduling purposes. Step 3 is a handful of settings files to help add additional properties specific to running calculations after the fact. Now, we theoretically could have done this in one shot, but it made it a lot easier to separate the two so that you're not getting more than you need. So we have some base property set files here that you run, and then you'll run the calculation settings files. And the user guide highlights and points out which settings need to be run and what kind of when, right? So I believe it was page 83 where the properties settings and the calculation settings files were listed, and it tells you, run these if you have certain connectors in your files, in your families. Then there's another one that says run these if you need to do a certain thing. However, you must run one of the property ones first. So it kind of tells you a little bit on how to get that going. And I'm going to walk you through it today. So this is how I want to work, and I've organized my settings as such. The second piece to this is preparing the settings files themselves. Now, each family processor settings file is mapped to the shared parameter file and in our working environment, not yours. So those need to be updated. If you don't update those, when you open family processor and you load the settings in, they will not be 100% correct. Some data is going to be missing. So you have to do this to make sure that things work smoothly. So that process is as follows. You find any of the settings files. These are just text files with a specific file extension on the end. You can edit any one of these in Notepad. So if you just select one and right click it and go to edit with Notepad or open with Notepad, or I got Notepad++, it's my preference. You edit it in Notepad, and right at the top, within the first 10 lines, is the parameters file being used. And right now, it's mapped to the R drive in our case. I need this to be mapped to where my shared parameter file is going to be stored for this process. So I have that back here. And just going to copy paste this right into that line so that I have exactly what I need. Now, there's another path that will be listed depending on which settings file that you open, and that's the lookup tables folder. Some of these, depending on which one you run, not only does it need to map to the shared parameter file, but it also needs to map to the lookup tables. That's another path, and you'll just have to map that to the appropriate folder as well. And that also lives in the common add-ins folder under lookup tables. So if you parse this out and separate things a little bit, like I did, make sure you're pointing to the lookup. You either bring these along with or point it back to wherever you have it on the network, just to make sure that you're not going to miss any information or lookup table imports that happen, because there are a couple of times where that does need to happen. In fact, I believe the example I'm going to show you here in a bit does actually do that. I've already set it up. So make sure you do that, save the file, and move on. And you'll have to do that for every single one of these, unless you want to edit the Notepad file to figure out what file path we used and match that. You won't be able to match that in every single case. So it's just best to run through and do the edit, quick copy, paste, save, move on. All right, so now we're ready to go. The next step we're going to focus on is upgrading the content, or updating your MEP content to work with the 2020 pack. So the first thing we need to do is process every single family with the all remove and replace MEPPP version 19 RFP settings file. I'm not going to process everything. I'm going to process one family just so you can see how it works and what's going to happen. Step 2 is going to be processing the schedule specific settings. And that is contained in a list. That's all of the other settings files that are shown in that list. And I'll leave my window up for a moment so you can take a screenshot if you'd like. Then we are going to process the additional properties and calculation settings files. And those are technically 2 different runs. And then we rinse and repeat until complete, because there are some of these settings files that need to be run. There's multiple settings that potentially need to be run on any family. Some will only require one. Depends on what connectors are contained within the families themselves. All right, now what I'm going to do first is switch over to my baseboard family that I've got open. This family, it came from the 2019.1.1 pack. And it has a few connectors in it. And what you want to do is find out what connectors are in the family so you know what other settings files need to be processed. So before I process anything, I'm just going to do a quick review of what connectors are in my family. So in this case, I've got a hydronic supply, another hydronic supply, and a hydronic return. Those are the only 3 that I've got. So this one's simple. I don't have to run a bunch of different settings. I have to run 3 in this case. The remove the add and remove all, the baseboard schedule setting, and then the last one, which I believe is the heat fluid transfer settings. Now, so let's just go ahead and do that. So the first step, open family processor. And before I go ahead and load anything up, I'm just going to clear my settings out real quick. And for those of you that are not familiar with family processor, I'm going to give you a 30-second overview and then recommend you go reference our YouTube channel for more information. But what family processor is for you is it's a family property editor and cleanup utility that you can use on any family, any single family or a batch of families, and it will do a bunch of deletion of properties and materials. It'll add parameters. It will allow you to define formulas and categories and all sorts of different things to go along with it, and then process it on the current family or on a folder full of families or your selection. So it's a very, very, very powerful tool that allows you to do a lot. And if you're new to the game as well, and you're trying to do some content cleanup and standardization of your family processor is the tool that's going to help make that process go a lot quicker and you'll be a lot more consistent, which is also why we are using that for this workflow. Now, I have already updated the settings for my all remove and replace settings file. So I'm just going to open that one directly. And we're going to back up. Yep, I suppose I was just in the right spot. Settings, MEPP3 upgrade, all replace and remove. We're going to open that. Now, in this case, I'm going to just walk through here real quick so I can see what it's actually doing. For family level processing, it's not changing anything. Now, one thing I would change if I were you, if you're going to run this in bash on your content and do all of your families at once, I would edit this file first and turn on auditing so that it's going to audit all of the families when it's opened prior to doing all the work. In this case, since I'm just doing it live in front of you, I can't audit it, so I'm not going to have that checked. Second tab is for lookup tables. This allows you to delete anything that you no longer need and import ones that you would. The settings take care of that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Not a bad idea to take a quick peek so that you have an idea of what is going to happen and you know what to expect. Materials tab, delete, add, or change. In this case, nothing. The change parameters tab is where all the work is happening. So first step is to delete parameters. So there's potentially a fair amount of parameters available or used in the older versions of the pack that we're no longer using, and they've all been replaced with something else. So we've got a long list to get rid of. And then we have an add parameters tab. If we were to add any in this step, the step doesn't do much of an add. But we could. It's the replace tab where a lot of work is happening. So the replace tab is going to give you the list of the parameters that are currently in use, their type, and what they need to be when this process is complete. So we're doing a remove and a replace. Simple as that. Or I should say replace and then remove, because you can't remove it and replace it in that order. Just don't work. So not a bad idea to review this list real quick just to make sure you understand what's going on. Now, if you had not updated the shared parameter file path at the beginning before you opened this, I'll let you know right now, it's not going to, family processor isn't going to know which shared parameter files to reference, so it doesn't know which shared parameters to put here. So these are all going to be blank. If you don't want them to be blank, edit the text file first make your change, save the file before you load it in. All right, and that's it. So we're not changing anything, so we're just doing a remove and a replace. And the processing order is here in case you need to move things around a little bit. And then we do the select and begin process. Since I'm just doing what I have open, I can do the current family file. If you had tested this out, you were happy, the results were what you expected, you can switch over to the multiple family files tab and run everything. And what you can do, and what I would do in that case, is if I was going to process my entire library, I would just browse to where I've got it saved on my network, add everything to my queue, and I would actually save it to a different folder so that I have the original 2019 content, and move everything into the upgraded to 2020 folder, just in case, right? You want to make sure that you still have your legacy content in the event that you did something wrong, or you accidentally changed something, or whatever, or the program crashed halfway through, and now you don't have to worry about remembering which one it crashed on or anything like that. That's just how I would run it. And I would recommend you do the same thing. Yeah, in this case though, just current family file, you hit begin. It's going to give you a quick overview of what it's going to do. All the parameters getting removed, everything getting replaced, hit continue, and now we wait. Thankfully, it's not doing a whole lot of heavy lifting, and it's only doing it on one family, so it doesn't take that long. A few seconds to a minute. And when that is done, I'll get a report. I can review the report, see what errors I run into, what the warnings are, and where things were successful. I recommend reviewing those reports because, again, you want to have a good understanding of what is actually happening. There will be errors in this file. I give you a heads up on that right out of the gate. And the reason why there are errors is because not everything exists. You can't delete something if it doesn't exist. So, and I guess it's not errors, it's warnings. Okay, so these parameters could not be deleted because they didn't exist. No big deal, right? But it's a good idea to pay attention to these lists so that you understand what the next step is, or if you have to take a step back and do it again. And then we have a lot of successful reports. So you can just click the little buttons here and it will filter the list for you. So you know what was deleted, what was added, what was replaced. There's additional info here as well. And in some cases, there will be parameters that can't be replaced because, again, they didn't exist. No big deal. Now, you can save these reports, and I recommend doing so if there was an error in there that you did not expect. Something to do with instance versus type properties, or couldn't apply set formula because of whatever reason. At least that way, it'll tell you the family name, it'll tell you what the error was, and you can go back and resolve the issue. In my case, this is all expected. So now I can hit close. I'll be prompted to commit those changes to my family. So yes, and you only get that if the file itself is open. If it was closed, process is already done. Family's already saved. Now for the next step, I'm going to open Family Processor again. I'm going to load a different settings file. So the next step is to run the schedules. So I'm going to hit open, back up a step, go to my schedules grouping here. And again, I built all this stuff out so that we had something to work with here. And I'm going to grab my baseboard radiation schedule. And there's a couple of them here. Now, it depends on which schedule or schedules you need this content to show up in. If for whatever reason, there's some different schedules that your content needs to be visible and scheduled in, run those schedule settings. Because there will be sometimes more than one, and that's okay. If there is more than one, run it. So I've already edited this one, so I'm going to run it. And, again, doesn't hurt to take a look and see what it's doing, just for your own personal benefit, what it's going to add, instance or type, what type of parameter, where it's going to be added. In some cases, there may be formulas and values predetermined by this. You can see what they are. Tweak them if you need to. Go to the replace tab, nothing, parameters to change, there's a couple. And then go. And you can just kind of keep going. And if you have faith that, and if you're not going to change anything, you just change the file path, in theory, you could just load it and go. Load it and go. And if you haven't made any significant changes and you just want the stuff to work, it will. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep going, one after the other. And after the schedule settings file is done, I've got 2 more to run for this. I've got the heat fluid transfer one and a hot water coil. And while that's running, open up the user guide real quick, just so you can see this section here. So again, on page, where is it, 80, is where the family processor settings begin. It's within chapter 5. And, you know, it gives you a good idea of what needs to be done, right? About adding the shared parameters and where to look for certain things, you know, specific to what's being edited. There's parameter replacement options here. Then this is where we start getting into dealing with manufacturer content. Some typical named parameters that you should look for when replacing them with the stuff from the pack. And then it has a little section on upgrading the legacy content. On the final page of this section is where the rest of the properties and calculation settings files are listed and how to determine which one to get used. So after my schedules one runs, I need to know which 2 to run next. So if you remember, with this radiator family, I only had hydronic supply and return. You know, so hydronic connectors, that was it. So which of these settings files do I need to be running? In my case, there is one of them here that applies to any family with a hydronic supply connector. Step 1. Okay, so that makes it really easy to run. Come down below, and is there any other category that this would apply to? It's a radiator, would have hot water in it potentially, so I need to run the hot water coil calcs set. And it even tells me, run this heat transfer fluid one first. So if by looking up here, you're not certain which settings to run, come down here, see which one you would need to run, and then it'll tell you what to run first. At bare minimum, right? And if you've got a couple of these that apply, like maybe you do have hot water and gas heat, you'll have to run supply air and heat transfer fluids before you can start running gas heat and hot water. And that's okay. If you need to run 4 of these to finish the process, you're going to have to run 4 of these. And again, I want to reiterate, we did this so that you don't have a bunch of extra parameters in your families that aren't being used. We wanted to keep this to only what was needed. Let's see if mine's done. Yep, it's done. Okay, now here's where the errors are. And I have errors because something already existed. I couldn't add it, and that's fine. Or it didn't exist, so I couldn't delete it. Good. Just make sure that that's all that those were. Yep, they are. Turn them off. 2 warnings, I'm happy. Processing current family file, okay. And then a bunch of successful stuff. It worked. Sweet. Now I can close this, commit the changes to my document, get a little message about a sweep that doesn't actually exist in the family, and we're good to go. Well, I take that back. It exists in the family, but it's a benign message. You get those every now and again while you're doing some family editing, especially if you have stuff in the same place, or you know, a specific parameter needs to get modified for that sweep to change. It's okay. It doesn't break anything. Some of them might be a bad thing, and that all depends on what family you're upgrading and what changes maybe were made to it over the years. Excuse me. All right, next step is to run the heat transfer fluid setup and just kind of keep going. Keep on going down the line. And now, so I'm just gonna do it. Properties, heat transfer fluid. And in this case, instead of, picking and clicking on everything, well, except for this one, because here you can see there is a lookup table that's being sourced here. So that one I did have to map, and this is another one of the settings files that I had to point out or edit 2 paths instead of just the one. But I'm just going to go run through it and hit go and hit go again. Now, once these are done, you want to load it into your sample / starter / test bed model to make sure that the schedules work as you would, the content works in the schedule as you would have expected. And you want to do that with any family that you're working on. We always recommended for years, I've always recommended, make sure you're flexing your family at various stages to make sure it's functioning the way you expect it to. Make sure you load it into a project so you can see it functions and appears the way it needs to, and so it schedules as you would expect it to and as you need it to. So that still applies. Load it into the project, make sure it shows up, make sure you can edit what you need to edit. I'm happy. I close, apply. I got one more I'm going to run. There's my sweet problem again. That isn't actually a problem. And last but not least is in this case, the hot water coil setting. Oh, I'm going to open that one up, go back to my calculations folder that I built and grab my hot water coil, hit open, and then we're just going to run it. Go. All right. So between these last 2 settings files that were run, I've added additional parameters. We've added some parameter values and formulas based off, previous parameters and values placed or added to the file. So we're taking care of the rest of that now. And now this last step, once I get it saved, I'm going to load it into my starter project, drop it in, and make sure it shows up in the schedule. So I've got the starter project already open. You don't have to wait and watch me do it. I'm just going to load it into this location here. So I'm just going to zoom in, get myself ready to go. I've got my baseboard schedule open already. It's showing me 2 that I've already got. And we're just going to throw this one in. And actually, I think this is the wrong level. Now that I think about it, I should be on level 3 where the other 2 are. Yep, that's them, right? Yep. All right, so I believe we're done. Oh, not quite. So let's see. Get to this one. So this is where it's going to show up once it's popped into place, and any additional parameter data that's present should all be here. Now, come on. It's the oh, there we go. Just finished. Here we go. So again, review the settings. Make sure you're happy with it. Save it if you need to. Copy it into another format or to an Excel file if you'd like. And now I'm going to save my family. I hadn't done that yet, so I'm glad my computer decided to play nice today. So now I'm going to save it and go back to my project. And actually, before I do that, I'm just going to close it. And I made one little mistake, and that is I forgot to specify a different folder for it, and that's okay. And I'm just doing a quick little rename on the backside here so that I can actually tell the difference between the 2, because I already have a baseboard family loaded in here. So I'm going to do my insert, load family to here. Here it is. Now we're going to load it in and place it real quick. Okay. Go get it. Excuse me. All right, there it is. There's the one I just made. I renamed it with a V 20.1. I'm going to go ahead and just put it right there for now. We can see it show up in the list. And look at the schedule. So I should have this BR-XX instance, which I do, and it tells me information that is similar to what we're seeing above. Where it's located, make and model, product type, sizes, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, it's not tied into anything, and I haven't made any additional adjustments to it yet, but that looks pretty good. All of those are filled out with something for the most part. So I'm happy with that. Now, you guys being the engineers and doing the work and doing all the heavy lifting for your firm, take it to the next level. Start clicking on parameters, start making changes, go into the views themselves and start, connecting things up and making sure that the flow propagates the way it's supposed to. Do your diligence. But following this process should get you to that point where things will work and the content will work in your models. So that's part one. The next part is migrating or incorporating your manufacturer content into your pack environment. And there's a couple of steps that need to be run for this as well. So we don't have to run the all file this time. It's just we're processing content using specific schedule settings again. And based on the content you're trying to update, those are the settings files that we're trying to use. Today's example is going to be a fan-powered VAV box. So schedule settings, additional properties and calculation settings files, and keep going until you've got everything in that you need. Again, there may be more than one properties file, and there may be more than one schedules file and calcs file that you need to run. If there are, just keep on going. And you won't know 100% until you've opened the family and kind of linked it all up together. So here's the VAV box that I downloaded from Daikin's site. So it's a Daikin 10 parallel electric heat. So I've got my, electric connector here, and I've got supply and another supply. So we've got two supply connectors here. Pretty straightforward at this point. So that means if I go back to our settings, if our user guide here, I've got electrical connectors. So I have to run the electrical auto size calculations one if I want to incorporate some of that and make use of those values in my projects. If you really only need the basic schedulable stuff, fine. But if you want to take advantage of some of the extra power that's built into the pack, you need to start running some of this stuff. And there's a couple of extra steps that we'll have to take prior to just running the settings. We can't blindly run stuff anymore with these. We've got to be a little bit more diligent and pay a little bit more attention to make sure that we are replacing parameters properly and with the right stuff. So there's going to be a little extra work with this one. All important just the same. So, oops, I didn't mean to minimize that yet. So I've got my electrical one, and I have supply air properties to run. Any mechanical equipment family that has a supply air connector, right? So, okay, so I've already out of the gate got two from the properties section. Then down below, do I have any to run after the fact? And I do. If I can remember the which one did I say it was again? Oh, yes, there it is, electric heat. That's the one. And any others that would need to be run. It depends on what you need to use them for. With time consideration, I don't think I'm going to run all 5 of these, but I'm going to get going on it right now. So, and then the schedules one, I forgot to point those out, but we have schedules settings to here to look at. Where'd they go? They are, oh, I lost them. We'll go back. We want to do this. Here we go. For the schedules settings, and here's the list of all of them. It's a long list, but there's a lot of schedules in the pack, as many of you know. Now, I'm doing a VAV, which is down at the bottom. I'm going to slowly scroll down here so you guys can, you know, screen cap it if you want, so you have an idea of what you're working with. Oops, right there. But the VAV down here at the bottom, there's a couple that we can work with, depending on, again, what schedules you want them to show up in. I'm just doing the one right here, and I've already labeled it accordingly. So mine's all set, ready to go. So that's the first one we run this time. It's not a previous pack family, so I don't have to run the replace all, remove all. But I can run that schedules one just the same. And hit open. Now, before I hit go, I need to pay attention to the parameters and specifically the replacement of the parameters before I'm moving too far ahead of myself. So we can add parameters all day that allow you the opportunity to schedule some things, right? And give you the chance to do some of the manual entries. And if that's all you want, fine, run it and be done. But a lot of the families that we're working with have additional properties in there that maybe have some automation built in to do some additional formulaic calculations for you that you don't, you want that information too. We can replace those parameters with ones from the pack so that you're not losing out on anything. And if by adding all of the settings files, you can actually packify your content regardless of where it came from. So in this case, the way this will work is you need to specify which parameters from the family need to be replaced with parameters from the parameter file. So, you can start with the obvious, the product dimensions. And actually, they're not labeled as product, they're just width and length and height. So you can start to search up here for them and start adding them to the list below. And once they've been added, we can now specify the appropriate parameter to associate them with. So product height, product length. Product length and product width. Oops, I missed it. Width. Okay, the basics, right? Those are super simple, really easy to get out of the way, especially if you want to maintain that control. Now, the next piece is, what about flow or voltage or amps or any other information that would be important or that would potentially need to show up in a schedule? As you get more familiar with the pack, you'll start to understand what data needs to be in the schedule. And we can go start looking for that specifically. So if I were to say, search for air, and I can find the actual airflow or the actual supply airflow and start applying those accordingly and add it to the list below and then add the appropriate parameter to it. So supply airflow. And then we'll do load and grab apparent load and add that to apparent load. And you just kind of work your way through the list. And again, grab what you need for what you need. And if I'll just do a heat and grab the electric heat capacity there and associate that with rating there. And I got one more that I'll add so that you don't have to watch me manually put this all together. Excuse me. And there, system folder. Okay. This list may be longer, it may be shorter. It really just depends on how much you want to incorporate these families into your workflow, right? If you're using Daikin all the time, or McQuay, or Train, or Price, or additional Titus families, if you're using those all the time, then it makes sense to have those fully functional within your pack environment. So yeah, so I've got that mapped up. I got what I need here. If there's any additional parameters that you need to change, do it. Add them from the list. Make the changes. Is it instance versus type? What the new values need to be, and away you go. And again, I got it open already, so I'm just going to hit go, and away we go. Now, again, I want to reiterate this. You just got to know what you want. And if I go back to the, let me go back to the starter project here. And if I were to open up this VAV fan powered schedule, this is a perfect indicator of exactly what I need access to in my schedules, right? Name and number, space name and space number, the manufacturer, model, product type, equipment sizes, design airflow, all that stuff, right? And if that exists to an extent in the family that you're trying to incorporate, you've got something to map. If it doesn't, then you've got something that you're adding and will be available so that it can be scheduled. You may want to go back and edit the family again and link some of those parameter values up to the connectors to make sure that you are actually propagating the appropriate information throughout the model when appropriate. So there may be some extra work to do, and it's not just processing of a bunch of settings. There could be some, intentional content editing here to get exactly what you need from those manufacturer families. So, and a lot of those families, they differ, they vary, right? A lot of them are built, but they're built by whoever, so they're not always going to be a walk in the park. We'll just put it that way. All right, so that one's done. Close it. I'll apply it. All right, so that's the schedules file. I'm going to run it again on this time. We'll do supply error on this one. And in this case, I believe I have to update it. And yes, I do. So again, I'll walk through that process before I load it in the family processor. We're just going to edit it with Notepad and get that path cleaned up appropriately because I didn't do that yet. All right, so I've got my shared parameter path right there. Copy paste it in. Good to go. Save it, close it. It's already refreshed. We're good to go. All right. And again, depending on what is actually being done in some of these files, there may be some stuff you need to do on the replace tab. If there's anything specific that was not being added previously that is being added now, there may be some additional replacements that need to happen based on what's happening and what family you're working with. If that's the case, you have the opportunity to do that at some point. I'm just going to go. This one's not doing as much, which is great. Then while that's churning, I'm going to go ahead and open up my settings here, do a quick little, make sure I've got my edits done already on the electric auto size calculations, because I didn't do that yet. So this one I might not do because that's a lot of extra stuff to add. But oh my goodness, we're almost out of time. But in this case, you can see there's all the lookup tables here that need to be imported. And they're all coming from the lookup tables folder, which I have somewhere. Where did I put that folder? There it is. And this all comes with the pack. And I went ahead and moved them, but they're all in here, just like the file is expecting. So I would just copy paste all those paths, and then I have the ability to run with it. So I could, what? I'll just do it. Why not? Why not? Why not? Do that. And there we go. We'll just go ahead and run it through the list. That's fine. It's a one-time thing, thankfully. And once it's done, and I won't have to worry about it again. All right. Now, let's see here. We'll just kind of keep going. Not seeing any new questions. That's good. All right. Then, you know what? We'll just call it a day at this point. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for you guys to ask any questions and such. So, last one. Here we go. Here we go. Save it. Close it. All right. So that's good. Yep. Change it. Okay. We'll do the next set and we'll just keep going. And as these are processing, I'm going to go ahead and start answering some of the questions as they come in. Oh, look at that. Of course, and then I do it wrong. Look at me go. And then I must have pasted over something incorrectly, and that's on the, which is too bad. I think I overdid my my text flow, or I just forgot to do it. That's probably too. Anyway, as I'm fixing this, we're gonna review that question. Yep, I removed the file name. That's why. All right. So the question that came in, or the statement that was made, I guess is what they said. Find and replace would be better. Well, yeah, it could be. And why not? I didn't think about that. Good call. Appreciate that. And I'm just going to run it. But you can get an idea of what it's doing. Here's all the lookup tables it's going after. There's a delete run. There's a replace run. There's an add section. So this one's going to take a while. And in an effort, I'll do it. We'll just run it. And we'll let you guys ask questions, or, at this point, there's not a whole lot left to show except to kind of get it into the project and show you that it worked, right? Once all the settings have been run. Now, the only other, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out after the fact. I'll do it now while we're waiting for some of this content to process. Again, this is all information that I'm walking through and showing you guys today. A lot of this workflow and these processes are built into the user guide. The user guide is in the folder that comes within the pack, right? Pointed that out to you. But you have access to that. You don't need to buy the pack to get access to some of this information. If you go to our website, cdcsoftware.com, and go to our products page, and then to MEPPP down here at the bottom, there's an information kit that you have access to. You can download this info kit and get access to some of the additional information out there that we have to kind of get your feet wet, right? If you don't already have the pack. If you do have the pack and you just haven't updated it yet, go download your update, or go dig up this information and start reading through it. It's all contained in that folder that you would have downloaded, installed, extracted, what have you. So the user guide, extremely important. It got a huge overhaul with this go around to explain everything. The section that I'm working on specifically for today was chapter 5 under family processor settings, starting on page 80. Right? Just again, make sure you guys know where to go. There's information that happens prior to this, talking about the MEP schedules and parameters and what some of the additional features are and kind of what's contained and what's there if you need it. And a lot of that is actually right there on top when you open the starter project for the first time. On that cover sheet, you actually have schedule parameters and features. There's a lot of good stuff here, right up here on the surface. Some conditional formatting information, error properties, supply property, things like that. A lot of good stuff here to look at right out of the gate. And we're done. So that one finished. Again, I like looking at my errors to see if I did anything wrong. Cannot replace a parameter of a different type. See, this is the kind of thing that you need to be aware of when working with some of this stuff. Now, because if we're swapping instance and type parameters, if they're not referenced by anything else, no big deal. But if they are used in a formula or are either in the formula or have a formula there to control it, we may have some issues. So reading through these to make sure that you know what you're getting your hands on is extremely important. So I do have an issue here. So this is where I would save this out to a CSV file, to an Excel file, and come back and review that in greater detail and make sure that it's either benign and I can just ignore it, or make sure that I get it addressed and associate the parameter appropriately, and make sure that the parameter I add to replace it with is set to an instance or what have you, or maybe one of the other parameters that I added. So again, always important to review through those. Okay, so I've added those two, and I think I've got another one, but I'm not going to run it because I've already taken up enough of your guys' time. But the last one in this case that I would run is the electric heat settings file, which, just for the sake of pointing it out, I'm going to open it up real quick just to show you it. But it is that one, electric heat calculations. Now, again, I don't necessarily need to run it, but the family may not function as well as it could, or have the ability to be configured to function as well as it could without it. So it's possible you may not need it, or you'll have to come back and do it again later. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out to, we'll save it here, and I'll just do v20.1 again. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that and switch back over to my starter file and get it loaded in real quick. We got a question come in. If you guys are going through this process and you get stuck and you need some extra assistance, who should you call and how much does it cost? Well, you can start by calling us or reaching out to us at info@ctcsoftware.com. That's the wrong family. And we can have a discussion. We can see what's going on, see what's stuck, or what needs to be fixed, and go from there. We certainly have the conversation. You could also, if you work with ATG, reach out to them. They have a bunch of guys in the service department that can assist with stuff like this as well. Or they could, potentially work out a deal. They just, for a fee, do it for you. I don't know. Yeah, okay, so I did that now. Let's just drop it in and see if I did it well. See if I did it enough. Oops, I didn't want to go to properties. there it is. Loaded in my invalid type because that was the default one used, and I didn't load it in from the type catalog, and that's okay. That's on me. The type catalog right now at this point needs to effectively be rebuilt, potentially, because of what I did to it. And thankfully, with Family Processor, you can use it to help you get the starting point together on building a new type catalog. Of course. Okay, don't do that. Don't break. Please don't break. Thank you, Revit. All right. Now I can insert this into my file. It's placed. It's happy. No errors. Even better. And I've now got everything in here that I told it to add. So there's a whole bunch of extra stuff in here that wasn't there previously. And had I taken more time to link everything up, there'd be some of the parameters that aren't here wouldn't be. Like all these guys right here would have been replaced out with something else. Again, I didn't do the diligence and replace every single parameter that it could have been replaced, but I could have. I go to my fan-powered VAV schedule now that I've got this guy inserted. It shows up in my list. Here it is, and we can start inputting data, start giving it identities. It's not in the model, so the name and number aren't populating appropriately, but you know, it's here. I have access to the values, and anything that I can type in, I can. If it's to be sourced by another method, I gotta start populating those other methods. So at that point, we've got an hour. I wanna give you guys the opportunity to enjoy the rest of, or well, get to your next meeting or lunch or whatever have you. For the resources, there's 3 different places. I've already pointed them out. Go to our YouTube channel, CTC, or youtube.com/CTC software. Search MEP. You'll see a bunch of MEP pack videos, and that's where you'll find this one when it gets posted. For the additional product information, it's on our website. Any additional questions that you guys have, reach out to us, info@ctcsoftware.com. We're happy to help when we can. And with that, I say thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and week. It's been a pleasure, always is. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time.